Greetings. This is a long video. I suggest you put the playback to double speed. I don't want to waste your time and there's no really profound information in it. But for those few of you who are interested, I'm going to share it. So the video is a documentation of an experiment that I conducted this winter growing wheat, broad beans and carrots in pure sand, beach sand, with no fertiliser. And the idea of the experiment was to try and observe the phenomenon of biological transmutation. I was hoping that I would be able to get some good solid evidence for synthesis of nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus from air elements. You know, it's not high tech, there's no spectroscopy or anything like that happening, there's just some basic testing. So yeah, the results were interesting to me, but I don't want to waste your time, so I don't recommend that you watch the whole video unless you're really interested or don't have anything better to do with your time. Maybe you want to put the playback on double speed, because it's about a 40-minute video, I think. So yeah, I grew those crops in sand. I fed them only with a foliar spray, I beg your pardon, of seawater, neat seawater. I mucked up the mathematics. I was trying to put out 500 litres per hectare over the entire trial, or equivalent to. So unfortunately I put that out on every spray because I got a decimal point wrong in my calculations. So I put on 5 times more seawater than I intended to, which is still kind of interesting in its own right. So I'd hoped to do equivalent to 5 sprays of 100 litres per hectare to make it a trial that somebody who was interested doing it broadacre might be able to replicate it without too much hassle. Anyway, we ended up with 5 times that amount of seawater going out over the trial. I talk about the experiment in a bit more detail through the video, and yeah, I'll talk about the nutrition that was left from previous experiments in that hydroponic system in a bit more detail. Now that the trial's over, I am absolutely certain that there is no nitrogen left in the system besides whatever's left from the root material that's left from the crops that were just grown. So I'm going to repeat the experiment one more time in the coming winter, and we'll know this time round that there's almost no nitrogen in the system, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens. To summarise what I learned from the experiment, it just reinforced something that I'd already observed, which is that rain is the catalyst for nitrogen fixation in plant environments where plants grow, or in agricultural systems. It's absolutely obvious, and it was really cool seeing this, setting up this experiment, because I got to witness it without any doubt. So interesting implications to me are that a lot of people who have had a lot of airtime in terms of regenerative agriculture, or people involved with biodynamics and systems where they have very little inputs but get good yield out. If those systems are operating in an environment where there is significant rainfall, I think that if those people aren't acknowledging that the rain is a large contributing factor for the fertility of the system, I think they're really missing something critical. I'm not referring to anyone specific in saying that, but it's just really obvious to me. If you live in, like here where I live, we get about probably 700 millimeters of rainfall annually, and it's pretty challenging to grow anything in summer without irrigation. It's possible, but it's challenging. Environments where people get 2 meters of rainfall, and they're saying, I've figured out a system where I don't have to use many agricultural inputs, that is fantastic, and I'm not denying that their systems are highly productive and they're telling the truth. It's awesome, but I think it would be really interesting to look a bit harder at whether or not the rain itself is the main contributor for the success of those systems. And I say that because in this trial that I just conducted, there was no growth response from irrigation whatsoever. There was no soil food web, there was no organic matter, there was just seawater, rain, sand, and a tiny bit of leftover nutrition from a previous experiment. And the plants had no growth response to irrigation. The only growth response was in response to rain. So every time we had a rainfall event, boom, the plants would just bomb. They wouldn't bomb. The plants would grow, they'd have a big growth spurt, whereas the rest of the time they were just sitting there, stunted and showing nutrient deficiency. So that was really interesting to me. It just ruled out a bunch of other factors. It ruled out soil having anything to do with that phenomenon, and it made me hungrier to isolate that thing in rain, the energy or whatever it is that gives that growth response. And there was none of these growth response were associated with electrical storms either, so that's got nothing to do with it. That's a myth. Anyway, that's enough ranting from me. I'll play the video now, and if you've got a lot of patience, you can watch right through it. Here we are. We will begin at the end. So I've just harvested the wheat and broad beans. Broad beans ended up yielding 2.6 tonnes per hectare equivalent, and the wheat ended up yielding 0.81 tonnes per hectare equivalent. I got about 20 to 1 with the wheat in terms of seed to harvest, and about 8 to 1 in terms of the broad bean seed to harvest. So yeah, now I'll start the clips sequentially that I filmed during the trial. Greetings. I'm filming a little update just now. It's been about 1 week since I sprayed these plants with their first dose of seawater. I'm filming today because I'm starting to see some nutrient deficiencies. So particularly in the wheat, you can see this yellowing. Predominantly, that wasn't a good example, it's around the edges of the tips of the older leaves and starting to brown off a little bit. So I'm fairly certain that that is potassium deficiency. I'm quite happy to see that because it is good evidence that there is nothing available in the growing media in terms of remnant nutrition from previous crops. So that's very good evidence for what I'm trying to demonstrate here and what I'm trying to learn. I'm not too worried about it being game over for the trial because the weather's been so crappy here. We've had really windy, really overcast weather for a couple of weeks. There hasn't really been any good consistent sunshine. There's only been the odd hour or two. And then otherwise, yeah, it's been kind of overcast, 20 to 50 kilometre per hour winds and 7 to 15 degrees Celsius every day pretty much. So basically these plants have nothing to trade. They're barely photosynthesizing, and they're not going to be having anything to trade with the alchemists in the root zone, or in their own cells for transmutation of air and water elements into NPK, or into P and K. N, I guess, is a different story. Broad beans also starting to see a little bit of deficiency. There are these sort of crinkled individuals. There are a few like that. I don't know what that is. And then there are a few that are kind of browning off on the edges of the leaf like that, or blackening off, I should say. And that could well be phosphorus deficiency, I think. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I'm thinking I might do another seawater spray now, like another 50 millilitres per square metre spray as a sort of homeopathic dose of phosphorus and potassium, just to try and ride the plants through this shady weather. And then I'm hoping when the sun comes out we'll see a bit of growth. Carrots, there's nothing conclusive happening there. They are still so small. Only just first proper leaves are only just starting to pop on. Some of them, not all of them. So I'll probably do another spray now and keep you posted. Thanks for watching. 30th of September. Some of these broad beans are looking pretty deficient. Like, I don't know whether they're diseased or deficient, but you can see they're looking pretty poorly. There's an individual that looks quite bad. Some of them are looking pretty good. I just pulled one of the worst looking ones out to check out the roots. I wondered whether they were getting eaten underground by something, which I don't think they are. The roots look amazing. That's a fraction of the root mass. I broke a lot of it as I was pulling it out. You can see there's a little bit of nodulation. Sorry, it's a bit hard to see just where my thumb is. There's a few little nodules like that. Nice riser sheaths. And yeah, great roots. Looking for that. Looking for something. Because there's nothing in here. So I think I'm going to do another spray just to see if I can give them what they need. The broad beans in this bed look a lot better than in this bed. So I don't know whether that's because of the cell. These broad beans don't like the cell treated water as much. I think it's more likely that there is a difference in what was remaining in these beds from the last crop. It's a more likely scenario. The wheat's looking alright. Some of the plants are looking quite good, like this one in the corner's looking quite green and growing quite vigorously. The rest of it's sort of looking a little bit nitrogen deficient, still looking a little bit potassium deficient, but it's growing. Not a lot of difference between the two beds here at this point. I've done one irrigation since the last video, and then carrots there's pretty much no difference at this point either. They're looking okay. They're probably, I've got some carrots sown in good fertile soil, and they're probably about twice as big as these So, considering that there's nothing in here, they're doing okay. Anyway, 30th of September, going to do another 50 millilitres per square metre foliar, and keep you posted. 5th of October, and these just got their 4th spray of seawater. I just want to point out that there are a couple of carnations in the ends of these beds which have been there for a year or so. They're the only plants that I didn't pull out 9 months ago when I finished up with this and let it all rest prior to flushing it out for this trial. So yeah, interesting to see that they're not really showing any signs of deficiency or disease. There's a couple of aphids on them, but they're looking pretty good. And it's also handy to note that I have over here another one in a separate system, and this one here is being fed only for the last couple of weeks. I haven't fed this system over winter, haven't had anything growing in it, but the last couple of weeks it started to receive fertiliser, so it's got full NPK and trace available to it, and we can just do a little comparison over here with two mature plants, one of which has recently been fertilised and one of which has had no fertiliser. Yeah, and you can see that the one in my hand that's had fertiliser is quite a bit darker than the one that's growing in here with the broad beans. But of course, people who are watching this may well say, oh, that's just getting nitrogen from the broad beans, and that could well be the case. So anyway, just thought I'd point that out. 12th of October. There are a few individuals here that look a lot better than the others. This broad bean plant here, it's growing a lot more vigorously. It's not showing major signs of deficiency. That wheat over in the back there is a lot more green and a fair bit taller and more vigorous than the rest of the plants. And then this carrot here is significantly bigger than all the others. So those three individuals appear to have some kind of alchemical knowledge. So I'm gonna burn that one at the stake. I'm gonna crucify that one. And then this one I'll probably just accuse it of fraud and maybe sexual assault, and then throw it in jail and burn all the books that it's written. No, I'm not really going to do that. I'm going to do Harriet's end-of-fight inoculation smoothie with these individuals. So I'm going to she recommended taking the tip close to the reproduction phase. I'm probably a little bit further away from that, but I feel like I need to do something now. So I'm going to cut the growing tip out of these three plants, the best wheat, carrot and broad bean, and then I'm going to whiz them up in the blender, and then I'm going to spray them out as a foliar in the hope that some of the microbiome that's helping those three outlying plants to thrive better than the others will be inoculated into the rest of the trial. I was really hoping I wouldn't have to do anything like this, and that the plants with full mineral nutrition, plenty of water in it, soil in inverted commas that's not compacted would be enough to see the effect that I wanted to see. I feel like it's happening, the transmutation's happening, and I feel like the wheat is fixing nitrogen. But it's not happening really dramatically, and the crops aren't looking great. They're looking a little bit stunted, so I'm going to give that endophyte inoculation smoothie a go. I don't know what the proper term for that is, that Harriet has coined, if it's her invention, but I'll try and find that out and put a note in the comments or the description. Cheers. I'm going to sieve that into there and then spray it out, which I won't be filming. Endophyte spray's done. I'm just thinking I probably should have done that in the evening, because if those life forms aren't getting taken straight into the plant, they're going to be copping some UV right now, which is probably pretty harsh. Anyway, it's done. See what happens. 14th of October, aphids are getting worse on the wheat. See them down in there. Maybe you can see it. So I'm going to do something that I never do in my garden, which is spray insecticide. I'm going to spray just some white oil on these just to try and save the trial a bit. Crappy, overcast, windy weather, weeks and weeks of it, only a few nice days in it, so that's partly what's going on. And then malnutrition is partly what's going on as well. So yeah, I'm going to spray the aphids just to try and give the trial a chance to finish up. Although I am well aware that there being aphids on these means the plants are weak and not doing well. I don't want to spray more seawater just yet, because then I'm getting outside of the dosage levels that are practical for anyone else to do it. To repeat this experiment on a bigger scale. Cheers. Check this out. This tub has had nitrogen added. Look at the water on the surface of the soil. And then this one doesn't have any nitrogen. Nor does this. Soaking straight in. "17th of October, had a couple of days of warm weather, so we had a bit of growth, which is nice to see, and I'm going to give these their 5th dose of seawater. It's going to be heaps of rain tomorrow, so I want to get some minerals on, and then hopefully they'll have a big spurt in that rainy weather. The broadbean's got a little bit burned by that application. Wheat's starting to boot, I think you call it. And there's a bit of flowering happening on some of these beans. A couple of days later, just want to document that the beans did recover well from the burning, the tip burn that they got when I did the last seawater spray. Nothing like rain. Bit of warm weather, bit of rain. Just looking so much better. October 21st, after a few days of nice weather, bit of warmth and no howling winds and a bit of rain last week, it's looking better and better. And just want to do a little comparison here. Zoom in a little bit. Don't know if you can really tell from here, but the egg water side is looking a bit better than the untreated side now. It's not necessarily a meaningful result because it could just be a variety of other factors, but there is a definite difference now. Not so much with the carrots, but with the wheat and broad beans certainly. Plants are in reproduction mode now, so I figured that the root development's probably about done. Or I guess the broad beans might push out some more roots, but the wheat's probably going to be taking stuff out of the root now. I might be wrong about that, I don't really know. But I just wanted to dig a couple up now and see what's happening. So fairly good depth of root on the wheat, and it's got kind of two styles of root. So from the seed there you can see there are these fairly fine roots coming down which still have some riser sheath, but it's not really dramatic. But then, so that's the seed, and then up here where the plant kind of has popped out of the soil, there are these thicker roots coming out which have really thick riser sheaths. The riser sheaths are sort of 4 mils thick on those ones. Thought that was interesting. And then broad beans have very thick riser sheaths all over, which is very nice to see. So not there's very little nodulation on the broad beans. Oh, there is some, you can see it. Sorry, it's a bit hard to get a focus, but they're quite small. There's one. Yeah, not that prolific. But the broad beans aren't looking end deficient. So yeah, that's that. 25th of October. We had some more rain last night and it's looking better and better. It's all about the rain. November 7th. It's all looking pretty good now. Wheat's looking really good. Broad beans are looking really, really good. No signs of deficiency now. Not setting any pods yet, but they look great. Beautiful flowers. Wheat's starting to head up. See a couple popping out there. It's not looking deficient anymore either. Quite amazing. Very much weather related. Warm weather and some rain, and it just really came good. So before I started this trial, I grew a couple of crops in this system. I set it up and then grew a couple of crops, and I fed those crops with diluted urine and seawater as a nutrient solution, about 5% urine and 1% seawater diluted into rainwater. The system recirculated, so you can see this sump tank here has a pump in it, and that would pump through the drippers, and then they drain back out the bottom of the bathtubs and into the sump. I haven't been recirculating this at all, so it's only been irrigated with fresh water and rain, and I've just been irrigating it enough that we don't get much outflow or much, leaching. But I did flush the system quite thoroughly when I finished up. So I pulled all of the plants out, roots and all, when I finished up the previous crop. Then I rested the beds for 9 months, and then during that time there was winter leaching from winter rain, and then I also flushed several hundred litres of fresh water through here, which brought the EC coming out down here down to about 5, and it's remained stable at 0.5 for the entirety of the trial. So then, as a comparison to that, over here there's another system, same deal, recirculating through the drippers. This one is being fertilised, and it's growing lettuce and asparagus mostly, and a few other things. And there's some nice celery over here, and then just planted it out with a few zucchinis and heaps of self-sown celery there. I need to clear that out. Anyway, so this bed is getting fed, and the nutrient solution EC doesn't really change between what's in the sump and what's flowing out of the beds. It's almost identical. So from that observation, we can be fairly certain that most of the EC that we're seeing in this system here is all sodium chloride. All the other nutrients will have been taken up by the plants. And I have been doing a little bit of monitoring over the trial, so I'll cut to another screen now. Whoops. Here are my nitrate values, parts per million. So this is the sump from the system with the lettuce and asparagus growing in it. It's 40 to 80 ppm, and then this is the outflow from that, from the grow beds in that system. Normally the outflow has less nitrates showing because I don't run it for ages, but for this I just ran it for like a couple of hours, so it was fully circulated just to really see the effect. And so the outflow is about 20 to 40 ppm, so it's about half. And then, so yeah, the plants and the biology in the bed have taken up about 50% of the nitrates. And then in the trial with no fertiliser, with the wheat, broad beans and carrots, the tap water is 0 ppm nitrates, and the outflow is about 5 ppm nitrates. There hasn't been a lot of outflow over the whole trial. These values have stayed the same over the whole trial from when I flushed the system, and then I've just measured it a few times when there's been a lot of rain and it's overflowed, but I generally haven't been irrigating it enough that we're getting any outflow. But yeah, when it's rained and I've measured it, or when I've accidentally left the irrigation on for a bit long and it's been flowing out and I've measured it, it's been around 5 ppm. So there is some nitrates in there. I don't think there's much of anything else other than sodium chloride. The EC reading suggests that there's quite a lot of sodium chloride in there, which is built up over the previous experiments. So what does all that mean? Well, we'll do the numbers. This system here has 12 bathtubs, so there are 12 tubs that all flow back into this sump, and after a few hot days of weather where there's a lot of evaporation happening and transpiration, when I refill the sump and tick it over so that it's recirculating, extra water will flow back from the grow beds into the sump, and then generally what's left in there is about 2/3 after I've done that. So from that we know that these 12 tubs take roughly 60 litres to get to field capacity. That's when there's already a bit of moisture in them, of course, but generally speaking it's always the same thing. It's about 60 litres when they're dried out and they need watering. 60 litres is what it takes to water the 12 tubs, so the tubs are collectively holding about 60 litres in the growing media. So now we'll do some calculations. We've got our bathtub surface area, 140 times 60 centimetres is 8,400 centimetres square, or 0.84 square metres. The soil water volume for each bathtub is approximately, so 60 divided by 12 is 5, or 5 litres per tub, so that was our 60 litres to fill the 12 tub system. That's what that number comes from. We've got our 5 ppm NO3 that we've been measuring all the way through, but I'm going to double that so that I'm being conservative in case I'm, in case I'm on the high side of the 5 ppm, because it is kind of subjective. It's just a colour chart to take that measurement. So we'll double it and we'll say 10 ppm. So that's 10 parts per million nitrates. So converting that to grams per litre, we have 0.00998 grams per litre. We'll multiply that by 5 to get a bathtub value, so then we have 0.0499 grams of nitrates per bathtub. Then we'll get a square metre rate from the bathtub rate. So to do that, we're dividing 1 square metre by 0.84 square metres, and that gives us this number, which we then multiply our bathtub rate by to get a square metre rate, which ends up being 0.0594 grams nitrates per metre square. And then we multiply that by 10,000 to get our hectare rate, and then we arrive at 707.1 grams NO3 per hectare. So I'm not sure how much nitrogen is in urea, but I think it's like 45-50% or something, so we'll say 50%. So it'd be equivalent to about 1.5 kilos of urea, if I'm right about that conversion. So can't do that looking through the phone screen. 1.5 kg per hectare. So what was left over in terms of nitrates, and whether that's coming from the breakdown of organic material that was in the beds or whether it's leftover nutrient solution, I have no idea. But basically it's equivalent to if we'd started by spreading 1.5 kilograms per hectare of urea at the start of that trial. So I hope that gives you an idea of how much nitrogen was in the system prior to starting this trial. I don't know how effective that much urea would be. So I don't have any comparison there, but I'm pretty confident that that wheat is fixing atmospheric nitrogen. Just in addition to that, farmers spread like 20 to 50 kilograms per hectare. So, 20, 30, 40 times that value. And of course, they get much more vigorous growth than what I've got out there, but you just got to bear that in mind when we're thinking about that number, and we're thinking, oh no, the plants aren't fixing atmospheric and they're just using up that. That's literally like between 1/10 and 1/30 or 40th what people commonly spread out on their crops. So yeah. Also, just to add to that, if we look at the composition of urine, which was the only input previously into that system besides seawater, then we can work out that from our N ratio, if those relationships had remained the same between N, P, K, then we would have 160 grams per hectare of phosphorus and 220 grams per hectare of potassium. Of course, they wouldn't be the relationships, precisely because the phosphorus and potassium would have been taken up quicker than the nitrogen in that situation because of the ratios there. There was more nitrogen than the plants would have wanted, so they would have been taking those out. But if it was all equal, they're the numbers that we'd be looking at based off of the 10 ppm nitrates that we measured. So it's, that won't be the real situation as to what's in there or what was left in there, but it's still interesting to do that calculation. So we end up with 707 grams of nitrogen, 160 grams of phosphorus, and 220 grams of potassium per hectare, equivalent to what's in those tubs. 13th of November. Wheat is flowering, and there are lots of predators on the wheat now, so no more aphids. First of December today. Beans are filling out really well. Looking good. Wheat's looking good. I think the grains are filling. I'm not very familiar with how that rolls, so sorry, just try and get that in focus. Yeah, can't tell you much about it, but the plants are looking good. I think carrots grew a lot. We had 17 mils of rain last night, and the carrots have grown heaps just overnight. And we also have had about 30 mils total in the last week. So there's been a bit of leaching, and this morning when there was still water dripping out of the grow beds from the rain last night, I took a nitrate reading, and there's no 0 ppm nitrates, not enough for me to be able to measure it with my test equipment. So that's really good to know. No nitrates left in here now, and I'm not really seeing any nitrogen deficiency in these monocrops growing in sand. I'm also absolutely certain now that the transmutation and the nitrogen fixation is completely related to rain. I used to think that it all happened in the soil, and it was about having the right conditions in the soil to achieve that, for the plants to be able to achieve that process. But now I'm absolutely certain that it is completely related to rain, and it may still be taking place in the soil, but it's certainly not that much related to it. Like, yes, there would definitely be biology to facilitate that happening in this soil, well, in this growing media, I should say, but this growing media, it's just pure pale sand. You know, there's no organic matter in there. There's no soil food web. Sorry, that's not true. There is a little bit of organic matter, and there would be a soil food web, but nothing like what I have learned from research, researching regenerative agriculture and organic farming, and all that kind of stuff. It's a totally different thing, and until that's accepted, we're looking in the wrong directions. And I'm not saying that I know how to farm better than anyone else at all. I don't know anything about it, but it's clear as day that it's all about rainfall, and it's not about how wet the soil is. It's just about the action of rain hitting the plants, and that is the catalyst for transmutation of elements. Absolutely no doubt in my mind about it now. So yeah, I really hope that people will be thinking about that a bit more, or that people who have thought of it a bit more will get some airtime to share what they've learned about it, because it's clear as day. I should also point out that this system is directly under the canopy of a eucalyptus tree. So if you're a skeptic, you could say that the reason that the rainfall is the catalyst for growth here is that nutrients are washing off the leaves of that eucalyptus and then dripping down onto the trial here. I don't believe that that's the case, but I'll point that out. Bit of fruit for the skeptics. It's the 9th of January, just about ready to harvest these. Pretty dry. Beans are still a few green ones on there, but just about ready. And I just ate a carrot out of here and it was delicious and wasn't too bad. Oh, that one I ate was bigger. Yeah, look at that. It's not too bad, considering how miserable the tops look. It's funny. 16th of Jan, gonna harvest the wheat and broad beans. Probably could have done it a bit earlier, but I've been busy. So after weighing those, I did some calculations, and we ended up at about 815 kilos per hectare for wheat and about 2.6 tonnes per hectare for the beans. I know that's pretty dubious. There'd be a lot of cumulative error in that, scaling it up to hectares from the bathtubs, but it's better than nothing. So yeah, about half, probably about 50% yield from what it says on the internet not looking very hard, that you might expect from dryland wheat or faba beans being grown conventionally. In terms of the seed, I reckon, this is a guess because I didn't weigh or count the seed that I planted, but I'm pretty sure the wheat was about, we got about 20 seeds for every one that we planted, and I think that's conservative. And then for the broad beans, it was about 8 seeds for every one that we planted. Harvested about 8, so there are those numbers. I'm going to repeat this experiment. Here's the post-harvest aftermath. There's actually, the bean yield would have been slightly better than that because there's probably another 10 or 20 grams of green pods still left on here that I didn't pick. There's a couple there, one there, and a few over there. Anyway, doesn't matter. So yeah, I'm going to do this again, but plant everything at a more appropriate time. I'm not going to rotate the crops. I'm going to go again in the same tubs, because the whole goal of this is to see evidence for fixation in a monocrop and biological transmutation. And as always, I'm trying to isolate that X factor that rain has, which makes it such an effective fertiliser, because I've been paying close attention lately and it's got nothing to do with lightning like they say it has. Anyway, I won't go on about that. The carrots didn't amount to a lot, but they did produce a crop, and these are absolutely delicious. I won't be doing them in the next trial. I'll probably use this bed and do a mix of wheat and broad beans. So yeah, I hope that's been amusing for you. Certainly been interesting for me, and I wish you all the best. Congratulations to the stoical among you who made it to this point in the video where I just want to spell out what I was trying to see and what I was trying to get at with this whole thing, because maybe it's clear in my mind, but maybe it's not that clear. So basically, from our calculations, we have 815 kilograms per hectare of wheat. That's our output, and 2,666 kilograms per hectare of broad beans equivalent. But look at our inputs. So the nitrogen was 700 grams. So from this 700 grams of nitrogen, we got 815 kilograms of wheat. So where did that nitrogen come from? Obviously there's plenty of nitrogen, we breathe it in all day, every day. But generally, the things that are considered able to fix nitrogen, legumes, and associated biology, or some kind of soil food web, none of that was present in this situation. In addition to the natural inputs of air, water and sunlight, there was the seawater that wouldn't have contained much nitrogen, if any. So yeah, I feel like this is good enough for me. I mean, in my heart I've always believed that things don't work the way I've been taught, but this is pretty good evidence for me that nature knows how to do something, and that when we look at things from a chemical point of view, we are missing out on the fundamental principle by which nature turns 700 grams of nitrogen per hectare into 815 kilograms of wheat. So I think science should be looking at, we should be trying to find out the secret way that a bit of rainwater can give the plants all the nutrition that they need. And I understand that adding fertiliser will increase the yield hugely, and that this is a fairly pathetic yield of wheat. Like typical dry land would be double that at least. But it's, in this situation, you know, there's nothing in the soil. There was nothing in the soil, and no inputs. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.